Today I'm going to show you how to create a Renaissance-inspired image by using lighting and makeup and background, all of these elements together for a painterly effect. Lindsay Adler here, and this photo deconstruction was created due to your popular demand. I put this on Instagram and everyone was like, how did you do this? And so I figured it was easier just to show you. So I'm going to take you behind the scenes, show you what was in camera, what was in post-processing. Now, of course, we always begin with the concept, and I knew I wanted a more painterly Renaissance image. And it began by me telling my team about this before the shoot ever happened. I told the wardrobe stylist, the guy that did the jewelry, about the type of look I was trying to achieve, as well as the hairstylist, makeup artist. So they could start looking at references and see what they could pull to bring the shot together. So of course, we started with beautiful makeup and beautiful jewelry before it ever got to the photography process. That obviously is important for the success of my image. So let's actually take a look though behind the scenes to see what I contributed as the photographer. So first, let's actually begin with the lighting. In the scene, I ended up using 4 different strobes. To achieve a painterly look, it isn't necessary. It really isn't. You can achieve a painterly look with 1 strobe, 2 strobe, 3 strobe, but in this case, each strobe had a job. So I want to walk you through what each one is accomplishing. So let's begin with the first light. My first light is a large umbrella with diffusion. It's to the top right of the scene. Now what it does is this gives a very soft overall glow to the shot, and it's so elevated above her head. What it does is it gives nice light to the top of the hair, and it also carves out the cheekbones and the jawline. So it's a very sculptural light. The next light that I add to the scene is a 5-degree grid. Now the 5-degree grid is what I call a face light. Like we have the main light over the scene, but then this one is dedicated just to illuminating her eyes more, to making her face pop a little bit more. So both of those are lighting her from the front and from above. Next up, we have to consider the background and the hair light. So in this view, you can see that I have another light over her shoulder to the left-hand side that's a bare bulb. Now what this does is it's kissing the side of her face, so it'll give a little bit of a rim light to her hair and to her jawline, but you'll notice that I have it pointed straight back towards camera. My goal there was to create a little bit of a haze, a little bit of a glow. If I'm going for a Renaissance painting, I wanted it to feel quite heavenly, and sometimes a little bit of flair will help achieve this. Also, one of the things I tend to use is something called a black pro mist filter. I learned this from Chris Knight in his painterly looking images. What it does is it takes a light source and it makes it glow a little bit. And it makes it give it that more heavenly painterly look. So when I have a light pointed back towards my camera, I'm more able to achieve this effect. You will see that these are 3 lights, but there actually is 1 more. And I'm going to show you from another angle so you can see that. If we go to another angle, you can see that behind the subject to the left is a small umbrella. And the small white umbrella is pointed towards the background. And that background is something I printed out myself. I went on Adobe Stock. I found this beautiful, dramatic cloud scene. And I downloaded that file. I licensed that file. And then I went to a website called Cape Backdrop. And Cape Backdrop, they print on these microfiber backgrounds, which are very portable. They don't wrinkle too much, but they're also really inexpensive. So I was able to select exactly the background that I wanted, and it's a very angelic looking sky. So you can see that there are 4 different strobes, each one with a job. So let's pop back over and let's talk about my camera. I use a Canon 5D Mark IV with a 24 to 105 millimeter lens, and I shot 3/4 length shots. If you go back onto Instagram, you can see that I shot some wider shots as well as some closer shots, and I shot at 4.0. The reason I shot at 4.0 is there were some wrinkles to the background, and also it is not a super high resolution file. So what I was able to do is kick it out of focus just a little bit. Shooting at 4.0, it's not completely out of focus, but I was able to soften it. So when I approached this scene, I was trying to figure out what's the right styling for a Renaissance painterly look. What's the right background? Now that I have the scene and the styling and the background, what about the lighting? And then the last part, of course, is the color grading, the post-processing, the toning to bring it all together. So let's look at what I captured in camera and then how I sculpted the light from there even more through Photoshop. All right, so this is where I began. Now the picture overall looks a little bit flat, and the reason being is that Black Pro Mist filter, what it does is it flattens out contrast. And so I knew I needed to add a bit of contrast. And for me, her face doesn't glow enough. In a painting, her face would have almost like a source of light to it. Some of the great Renaissance and Baroque painters, it looked as if the subjects were almost glowing. And I didn't quite get that look and feel. So as I was shooting tethered, I did some post-processing. Not Photoshop, but simply raw conversion. So this is where I got to. What I did to achieve this is I warmed up the entire photo. So it's a very warm color palette, but then I popped the highlights. Super important to pop those highlights because that's what makes her cheekbones pop out. And that's what gives the glow to the image. Now in this, because I was using a grid on her face, a grid is a hard light source. So if you look, I can see quite a bit of texture, a lot of pores, a lot of blemishes, not really what I would want in a painterly photograph. In fact, in a painting, the skin texture would be quite smooth. So the next part is popping over into Photoshop. And in Photoshop, the things I would see is, I don't want any stray hairs. You wouldn't see that in a painting. I want the skin to be angelic and glowing, so I'll perfect that. Also, the eyes should have a little bit more pop, a little bit more glow to them. And so this is where I went to in the final photograph. I also fixed her hair a little bit and I cleaned up the smoothness of the edge of the jawline. So from the original photograph to the end product. For painterly images like these, the best source of inspiration is to actually look at old paintings and to develop your concept around that. Now, if you want to know more about shooting in a very painterly style, I recommend you check out Chris Knight. Chris Knight, his entire style, his entire essence of his imagery is based around inspiration for paintings. And he actually has a tutorial called Finding Rembrandt that deconstructs Rembrandt paintings and how you can apply those concepts to your own work. So if you want to know a little bit more how to achieve this with less gear, or how to really train your mind to think like a painting, you'll definitely want to check out his tutorials. And you can find that in the links below. Speaking of the links below, if you would like to see the gear that I use to create this image, you can find that all in the description. And of course, if you want to find that gear, you can check out adorama.com. If you've enjoyed this photo deconstruction and you'd like to see more, be sure to subscribe. See you then.